children. You don't look at children as your property that you own, right? You see them as people with their own characteristics, with their own individuality. And I think there's a time where you can teach them whatever you know and get to know them. But then also, I think we need to learn the art of letting go.
When you experience their bad days, the tantrums, the screaming, the shouting, the whininess, the attitude now, right? It can be quite testing and trying, especially when you're already stretched in at work. Right? You have like a million things going on in your mind, then you come home, like you just want to relax, but no, you've got like a whiny or like a screaming child.
Yeah.
I find interesting about being a, what they call it, a girl dad, right? It's like, suddenly you become like, you know, like you hate men because like, you know, everyone is like potential threat.
Welcome to Tea Breaks with Therapists, where we brew conversations on mental health one sip at a time. I'm your host Chayan, and in this unique series, we aim to break the stigma surrounding mental health by engaging in bite-sized, insightful interviews with experienced mental health practitioners. So grab your favorite beverage, get cozy, and let's dive into the fascinating world of psychology, one tea break at a time.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Tea Break with Therapists. And today is a very special day because I don't just have one, but three guests with me. So I'll just have them to briefly introduce themselves. Maybe we start with Sabella.
Hi, I'm Sabella. I am a developmental psychologist and one of the co-founders at Remind. I have a son. He's 3 this year.
Okay, hello, I am Puveshni. I'm a clinical psychologist and also co-founder of Remind. And I have 2 children, a son who's 4 and a daughter who is 2 years old.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alex. I'm not the co-founder of Remind, but I do therapy here. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I have 2 daughters, one 4 and one 1.
Wow, amazing, nice. Thank you so much. You must be wondering why they are talking about their children and their ages, because today's episode is on parenting. So to start the ball rolling, just curious, have all 3 of you always wanted to be a parent?
To be honest, I have not thought of myself as a parent. Like, I guess it's something that I know people do, it happens, but I have not pictured myself as a parent, and that's something that I think over time it just grew on me. Like when I got pregnant, my firstborn, then I started thinking actively on the kind of parent I want to be and the kind of example I want to set for my children, right? So yeah, to answer you, I've not always thought of being a parent or dreamt about being a parent, but now that I'm a parent, I'm very happy and very glad that I made that choice.
I'm definitely on the same page. I've always worked with children, and I love working with children, but I've not really seen myself as someone who's very maternal. But, you know, similarly, like Poof's experience as well, we planned for a child, and then of course we have a son now, and it is a very worthwhile journey. So yeah, very fulfilling.
Difficult.
Difficult. It has its challenges, but definitely fulfilling. Yeah, especially when you see him, you know, for us, seeing him grow and just develop his own character, you know, seeing all his different traits, personality. So yeah, it is heartwarming, sometimes bittersweet, but overall heartwarming. Yeah.
Nice. And for yourself,
Yeah, I think for me, I was a parent even before I had my own children. Because I was working in the children's home before, so I had like 20 kids all under me. So I had like this early experience of what being parent like. Because I mean, I'm not planning to have 20 kids, lah. Yeah, and I mean it's a huge learning process, you know, because you know, trying to understand how to deal with kids, different characters. But I think when I have my own kids, it's a little bit different. I feel it's a bit easier, maybe because I went through that, you know, difficult looking after people's kids. And of course, these kids are usually they're there because of some kind of abuse or neglect. So it comes with a lot of behavioral problems. Yeah. I mean, I would want to be a parent. Yeah, so that's something that the thing is, I'm not sure whether I want to get married. The thing is, I'm not sure whether I want to get married. So it's a bit weird. But, yeah. Okay, I hope my wife don't. Yeah, but I do feel like if I ever get married, I want to have my own kids. You know, I've been looking after other people's kids for so long. It's nice to have your own children. And of course, it's very different because they start from young, whereas the kids I used to look after, they come from all kinds of different backgrounds. So there's a lot of adjustment issues, them getting used to you, you getting used to them. Yeah, so that was something that I feel like, that I would like to have my own kids.
Okay. I mean, for me, I have personally worked a lot with children as well. And I think the idea or perception that people have of me is that, oh yeah, one day you'll be a great mother. When I was growing up, I used to think that, maybe I want to have my own children as well. But as the years pass, right, and just babysitting my nephews, who are both 4 and 2 now, I'm having second thoughts, really. And it's not easy. I mean, as an auntie, I can just give the children back to their parents, right? But as parents, I think it's not easy, like it's challenging.
Yeah.
And for all three of you, you know, what are your parenting styles? I know we have heard of like permissive, neglectful, authoritarian, authoritative, but I believe it extends beyond just that 4 different types. So how is it like for all three of you?
To be honest, I don't even think about it. I just like
Right.
what am I right now? You know? We just do what we think is right at that point in time. You know. So, but if you ask me to reflect on how I deal with my kids, right? Yeah, I think it's very, very different compared to how my parents dealt with me, definitely.
Right.
And maybe because we're all psychologists, so we're a bit more aware of all this, what should be the proper, correct, this positive reinforcement, try to avoid punishment and things like that. And we try to practice what we preach, I think, you know. So like for myself, I think I'm more conscious about spending time with my 2 girls, especially girls. Why? Because when I was working in a children's home, I often see that these teenage girls who don't have a very close relationship, with their dad, they often try to find this father figure in all kinds of different people.
Right.
They fall in love very easily, you know, they get cheated by men who just gives them a little bit of extra attention, and they go into very, very toxic relationship and don't get out of it, because for them it's like, this is the only time I actually felt love by, you know, a male figure. And no matter how bad the situation is, they just stuck onto it because they fear that if I give up this one, I may not find another. So I kind of fear for my girls that they'll end up like that. I don't know. One thing I find interesting about being what they call a girl dad, right? It's like, suddenly you become like, you know, like you hate men because
The bazooka come out already.
because like you know, everyone is like potential threat to my daughter kind of a thing. Yeah, so I try to spend a lot more time with them, you know. I don't remember my own parents playing with me, and of course, girls being girls, they play girls kind of stuff. So I have to watch My Little Pony just to understand all the different characters, because she'll be like, Daddy, can you be Twilight Sparkle? Daddy, can you be like, who is this, you know, characters? And I had to like, and I think these are the effort that I think I take that probably my parents, like, you know, don't bother so much lah.
I think like what Alex said, right? Like, and especially when you have a really busy schedule, you need to actually intentionally be present, right? And I think that's what I try to do. I try to be intentional, and I try to be very conscious of what I'm feeling, what they are feeling, and just being in the present moment. And that sometimes is quite challenging because especially with my kind of job, I do a lot of different things. So while I'm with them, there might be some firefighting that needs to happen right then and there as well at work. So sometimes it's quite challenging. You get dragged away. And I think sometimes this is also where it differs from how my parents parented me. Because I think back then, you know, of course, I don't come from a very affluent family. So parents had to work. Like my mom had to work. She had to come back, and we didn't have maid and all this, you know. And we didn't come. I didn't come from a very egalitarian family. It was still very traditional gender role. So my mom would have to come back. She would have to cook. She have to do a lot of different things, which means she cannot sit and play with me or sit and do things that for fun, right? So I think that is where I'm privileged, and I recognize that privilege that I can actually make that choice of saying, hey, you know what, this time is just for you guys. It's just like I always joke with my husband, like, you know, I think psychology has given me more as a person than I can possibly give back to my clients, because it has changed the way I interact with my kids, especially, right? Like understanding them. And my son does not speak. He's 4. He has a speech delay. So dealing with that as well is quite challenging. So sometimes it's just about them screaming and shouting, and you're just sitting down there and trying to mirror your emotions, right? Like calm yourself down, breathe, and just sit through that. And I think that has been the biggest change, because I don't think we got that with our parents. Like, I don't think they had the awareness that that's what you have to do, right? So I think that is the biggest change I see in myself, in how I parent, that is quite different from how I was parented or the experiences I've had.
Like Alex and Poof as well. For me, even though, yes, you know, we have the tools, the framework, and we try to practice them, right? We try. It's really different every day, right? Like you may try something, it just doesn't work, then we're like, okay, next tool. But yeah, so it does help to have these tools. But in terms of my parenting style, I can't like really pinpoint like, okay, what exactly I am, because it does change. And with children, you know, that when they grow, they go through different phases, different stages, and we constantly have to adapt. So I find myself constantly adapting. But one thing for sure is that I try to be very present in the moment. So, you know, like what they've shared, we are often very stretched thin with the things that we do. So, you know, juggling work, managing household, and a child. So whenever my son comes home from school, or whenever he's at the home, my husband and I would tag team. So whenever we are with him, we try to be present, so put away our phones if or when we can, and just be completely present with him. So it doesn't have to be like an entire evening or an entire afternoon. It can be, you know, 10 minutes. And sometimes we have to remind him that, okay, you know, so in this time I'm going to play with you, but after this I have to go to work. There are a lot of struggles, like just last night, I had a session at 8 p.m. But on the way home, he kept asking me to play with him. So he'll tell me like, oh, Mama, when we go home, I want you to play with me. I say, oh, what about Daddy? Why don't you ask him to play with you? But he's like, no, I want you, Mama. I want you to play with me. 10 minutes. But unfortunately, I did not have 10 minutes last night because we were already rushing home. I was like, I just need to make it like back on time, then log on to Zoom and get on with the program, right? I said, I don't have 10 minutes. Then, you know, he started crying and all that. So I was like, oh dear. So then we tried to negotiate. I said, how about we do 2 races, because he's into cars now. Right. So say, okay, we'll have 2 races, right? And he's like, no, 10 minutes. I don't think he really even understands the concept of time. But it's also a reflection of what we always say, like, oh, you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, yeah. So then I think in the end, I said, well, I'm sorry, but I only can give you 2 races, or, you know, I just won't be able to play with you tonight. Then after a while, he thought about it and he was silent after the crying, and he said, Daddy, I want you to play with me. It's like they switched camps so fast. Where's the loyalty? Yeah, so it's just, you know, on a day-to-day basis, it changes. It, you know, constantly adapting. But one thing for certain, like I mentioned, like I try to focus on the quality of time spent with him rather than the quantity. Yeah, which is also very different from the way I was parented, because both my parents are working parents. So my mom travels a lot for work as well, but I remember distinctively when, the time spent with them. So when they would sit down and play with me, those are the memories that I still remember until today. So I remember, like, as a child, when you actually connect with your parents through play at this young age, I think it goes a long way. So yeah, definitely different than the way I was parented. So trying my best to be as intentional as I can.
And I think
Yeah.
with that, right, I remember a client told me this, and I remember when she told me this, I had goosebumps because she is quite busy and runs around and does a lot of things. So there was once where she just sat down with the child. She wasn't even playing with the child. She was just in the room with the child, just sitting beside her while the child was playing. And after like 15 minutes or so, the child actually looked at her and said, "Thank you so much for sitting with me." And that was like, and she wasn't on her phone or anything, like she was just sitting and looking at the child and just being completely present, and it had such a profound effect. So I think that is something we sometimes take it for granted. We're like, I'm not doing anything, so I just be on my phone, we just play, right? But actually that has a huge impact.
Hear a lot of intentional parenting, just really be with your child at the moment. And of course they say, it takes a village to raise a child. And of course, it's not just you alone as a parent. I think even your spouses would play a role in parenting or other people. Tell me more about how it is like for your own homes.
I think I was raised by a village. Okay. I would say so because I grew up with my grandparents. And so I had my aunts there, I had my uncle, and I think because my mom is very close to her family, so her whole family had a role in raising us. Like sometimes we'd be fetched by our aunts, sometimes we'd be fetched by our uncle, sometimes we were fetched by my mom, my grandparents, or whatever, right? But I think for us now, it's quite difficult because now it's just us with our kids and making do with whatever, especially if you stay in the city. Your family stays somewhere else, or like my mom still works, so it's not possible for them to come in. But I think that phrase is really important simply because a lot of time raising a child is very challenging and it takes a toll on the relationship. So when you don't take care of your relationship, it then affects a child. So I feel sometimes you may not have your family with you all the time, you don't have the village all the time, but you need to seek out your support system to help you get a breather or help you take some breaks from time to time so that you can refill your cup and then you can be a better parent to your kids, which is tough, and probably with the kind of living we have, we probably don't get that all the time. But as much as possible to actually seek that out. And also I think another way is because Asian culture, you have a very big family. It's also nice for the children to connect with the rest of the family, and I think that's also an added benefit.
For me as well, there's also like very few people that I can really trust, right? Like as parents, to just send your kids to wherever, especially in this day and age, because times are so different now, right, from back then. But it does help because I have also had to create my own support system. Because in the home, it's just my husband and I. We tag team all the time. And, with having a pandemic baby, right, it's always the both of us. But it is very draining. It is so exhausting. And we only have one child. But yeah, my parents are also based out of state. So I, have to really just look out for my own support system, like, when we need a breather. So you can have, I'm thankful to have my aunt, cousins, godparents, sometimes my in-laws as well. So
yeah, I think life really evolves and really shifts the whole idea of parenting. And of course, parenting comes with disciplining as well. And disciplining is so different for the generation now versus from our times, right? So obviously there's this statement now then is spare the rod and save or spoil the child. So what are your thoughts about this? I don't know about you, but I used to get caned for any wrongdoing.
Me too.
But now I don't think it's feasible anymore. But yes.
I think this is a very because for us like psychologists, right, we generally mix around with other psychologists, other people in mental health field, and everyone speaks the same language. But when we actually step out of this bubble and talk to people who are not in this field, I feel people still do cane. People still do use the rod, right? And for me, I think the rod in itself is quite symbolic. It's not really like rotan, but I think it's about teaching your child about consequence, the power of consequence, and if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And one parenting choice that I make that is not popular in my house with my family or even my husband's family, my in-laws, is that I don't want meal times to be a war, like a challenge, right? So I would serve them a variety of stuff, and then I put it in front of them, and they have like half an hour to 45 minutes to finish it. And they can choose, they have a choice of choosing whichever food they want and eating it. But I would not kind of look at what they're doing and force feed them and say, you have to eat this, it's good for you, and do all of that. So if after that time they don't finish it, then I'm sorry, you don't get anything else until the next meal time, right? And I feel that has helped me kind of shape, this is an example of teaching them that there are going to be consequences. If you don't do certain things, you are going to sleep hungry. And next day, you will learn that if I don't eat, I'm not going to get it, right? Instead of making it like a struggle and shouting and crying and all these things. And then it kind of ruins your relationship with food as well. Like food is seen as something bad or torturous. So I feel like that is a choice that I've made in terms of teaching them consequence. And that's how I generally interact. And I feel that has had an impact. But of course, it's not popular because people would say that, oh, you don't care about your children. You're not caring about them being fat. But I feel that is the kind of boundary I need to set. Because if I don't want to cane them, I need to find another way of showing them there's going to be consequences. And I'd rather do it in a more, for lack of a better word, civil way. That, they learn that they have a choice from a very early age.
So there's autonomy there.
Yeah, there's autonomy there, there's choice, and then they have to live up to the consequences of that choice. So that's how I think that rod has changed for me. Like I've been hit with the rotan or with your hand or whatever, right? But I think that is how it symbolically has changed in the way I parent my kids.
It's an interesting way of, setting boundaries. What about homestay Alex and Sabella?
I don't want to speak for all parents, but I think maybe I'm lucky that I don't have to use any cane or physical punishment on my two girls. But it's also something that I've decided to do. This is something that me and my wife were discussing. Because I've been there before. Been there in the sense that we used to work in a children's home where physical punishment was like very, very common. I didn't like who I turned out to be at that point in time. And I realized that there are actually other ways, to go about it. I think it's not so much like people want to really cane their kids. I mean, nobody wants to hit their kids, but it's just that they don't know how else to deal with that situation. I'm sure every parent, when they use their cane, is with the intention that I want to correct my kids so they don't turn out bad. And if they don't know how else to do it, that's the thing that they know, because that's what they experienced before. When I'm naughty, my parents hit me, right? And I don't know how else to deal with this kind of behavior issue. But I think my own personal experience is that when you use a cane, it becomes too easy, and the tendency is too easy in the sense that, it gets immediate response. The child will obey you immediately, but it's very temporary. Because the next time, because if you ask any parent who cane their kids, you have to continue using it. Because if you stop using it, they're not going to listen to you anymore. Right? And I feel like it's like kind of like a drug. There's a tolerance. The more you use it, the more the child becomes tolerant, and you have to keep on hitting harder, more threats, and until a point where you cannot differentiate between discipline and abuse already. And that's the thing that scared me. Because when I was using it last time in the children's home, suddenly I'm like, my God, like I'm becoming so abusive. And I decided, at that point in time, like, if I have my kids, I will not go there. Because it took me a while to come back and not, because it's easy, it's convenient, it's effective temporary, but it's not like the child is going to learn anything. They just learn to fear you. They don't do it not because they learn any values, but it's just I'm scared that they will hit me. That's why I don't do. But they don't, not do that behavior because they see the value in it. So I prefer to talk to kids nowadays. I don't know, because maybe I have girls. They're more
More compliant.
can talk one, And I never had. I mean, my 4-year-old, I never had. When she throw her tantrums, I never. Of course, there are times I really feel like, I always tell them, like, but I said I will not, and of course, then suddenly you're okay. You're a psychologist. How do you deal with this? And then for me, tantrums is like, it's just them not knowing how else to express their frustration. We have words, we know how to say, but for them, I don't know how to say, right? So what I do is I just hug her. That's it, and it works every time. It takes a while, very, very. It takes, especially when you're rushing, but just have to. And afterwards, suddenly everything okay already, right? And I realized that actually there are ways that we don't have to use. It's just.
When you experience their bad days, the tantrums, the screaming, the shouting, the whininess, the attitude now, right? It can be quite testing and trying, especially when you're already stretched thin at work, right? You have like a million things going on in your mind, then you come home, like you just want to relax, but no, you've got like a whiny or like a screaming child. And it always triggers like a reaction. So I think the immediate, most convenient reaction is to hit, because you have so much energy inside of you, right? All these emotions that you want to release it some way. But easier said than done. That's why it takes a lot of conscious effort, even on my part, right? Even though I'm trained in this field, to actually just take a step back to really calm yourself instead of just reacting. So reacting can be like hitting, can be yelling. But I also think that when we yell back at a screaming child, right, it's also us adults throwing our tantrums, right? We also have adult tantrums because we react. So again, takes a lot of conscious effort, a lot of practice to actually just take a step back, like find space for yourself. For me, I sometimes have to really force myself, when he's crying and screaming, to just go to the bathroom, drink a glass of water. Like, as long as he's not in immediate or imminent danger, I think I can afford that like few minutes for myself to just calm down, and then actually hug him, put him in a, when I used to work in a psychiatric hospital in a pediatric unit, they call it a physical home. But I mean, it's a hug lah. And sometimes parents would ask, like, wouldn't you spoil them, right? They're crying, but you hug them, isn't that like? But no, I think that, like what Alex mentioned, they are still trying to process all these big emotions. Like for us adults, at the verge of hitting or yelling at them, we have all these intense emotions, but as adults, some of us, or most of us hopefully, have the tool to regulate our emotions. But they're still so young and their brain is still developing. So, that hug actually helps them to regulate. So as parents, we need to teach them how to regulate. But going back to the hitting thing, so yes, I've also been guilty when he was having his meltdown. I was also like, feeling so intense and overwhelmed that I actually hit him. Then he cried even louder, and then later on, when he calmed down, he told me that actually he's upset. You keep pointing at me, and he looked at my husband and he did this, pointing at me. He said like, "Mama hit me. Mama hit me." So I think that act of hitting him was more hurtful than the hit itself. So then it actually just jolted me awake to think that, wow, our actions actually has a huge impact on them, right? And then, of course, now my son's going through this hitting, fighting, pushing phase, which is also normal part of their development. But in the moment itself, right, it's teaching them like it's not okay to hit, right? They're still learning, but it's that reminder it's not okay to hit. So then I also thought about it, like if we hit them, right, then they're going to think, why is it okay for my parents to hit me, but they're telling me not to hit other people? So it's very contradicting and confusing for their young minds. So similarly, my husband and I, we from the get-go, we've decided not to use corporal punishment and, just experiment with different ways, even imposing consequences, right? Because there are many other creative ways. It's, yes, a lot more effortful, but I think in the long run, it would be helpful for their development.
And if I may add, it's not only about the actions you do, it's sometimes also the things you say. Like, when your child is, like my child does not speak. So, we have to send him to a special school and get special. So the challenges is a bit more difficult and more challenging compared to my other child who's a typically developing child. So with that, my firstborn, because he doesn't speak, he cannot express what he wants. And it comes out as a lot of whining, a lot of screaming, a lot of shouting, crying. And just yesterday, he was doing all of that and my husband said, keep quiet. And that kind of took him back. And then he started crying and he was like, keep quiet. And he felt really sad that we told him to keep quiet while he's trying to express in the best way he can. So sometimes depending on your child, you also need to kind of understand, like for Zach, for Sip's son, it's about him hitting. For us, because our child doesn't speak, it's more of we have to be really mindful of what we say and how we don't shut him out or don't shame him for whatever he's showing. So I think it's they always keep you on your toes, and there's no one way to do it. It's a lot of different ways, and it's about getting to know your child, intentionally getting to know your child.
It's different. You cannot apply the same formula. Even when you go for all these parenting courses that will help you, you still have to know your own child and adapt according to each child. So I think it's not wise, to think that just because I know how to handle this kid, I can apply the same formula to another kid. And I think one of the things that we are always fearful last time is that, especially when you have your first child, I remember, we don't know what to do. So we always ask other people for advice, and some people say this, some people say that. So it gets so confusing, what you're supposed to do. But I remember one of my friends telling me, forget about what everybody says. Just trust your own instinct as a parent. And most often, you are right.
When you don't look at children as your property that you own, right? You see them as people with their own characteristics, with their own individuality. And I think there's a time where you can teach them whatever you know and get to know them. But then also, I think we need to learn the art of letting go instead of holding them too tightly and forcing our values, our goals or unmet goals on our kids and being that kind of parent. So I think it's also important for us to set in our mind the kind of parent you want your child to have, right? And if, let's say, I want to be a fun parent, then what are my behaviors that are going to show my child that I'm a fun parent? I can't say I'm a fun parent and then come back and angry all the time and, say, no.
I think that we need to learn how to meet our needs, right? And then, be able to just empathize, be compassionate, take breaks when we need to, right? It is a very exhausting journey. But when we are not, emotionally well, when we're so tired and overwhelmed, they get the brunt of it. So take care of ourselves first, then we can be the best, whichever parent that we want to show up as, then we can, only be the best that we can when we are well taken care of.
So we have heard from all three of them, and I also want to take this opportunity to thank my parents for raising me. for sowing into my life and also imparting values and wisdom. So thank you parents as well for being the amazing people you are. I hope this episode resonates with you, and if it's helpful in any way, feel free to save it and watch later, or just share it with any of the people that you think will benefit from this episode. So thank you so much once again, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!